What's going on, everybody? We are back with another episode of the Philly Faithful podcast. My name is Troy. I will be your guide on this journey that we are about to embark on. You can find my writings over at Sports Illustrated. You can find me on socials at Troy B Baseball, and you can find the pod on socials at Philly Faithful Pod, spelled just like the podcast. New logo, thanks to our man Christian Rao from First Pitch, the show where our national baseball show, where I am the third man on that show, along with Christian and Lindsey Crosby. So make sure you check that out as well. But we're going to jump into it today. Might not be as long of an episode as yesterday was, as there's not too much to talk about that's Phillies related. But we will go over the two National League East games that took place yesterday. The only two games of the day in Major League Baseball yesterday, and boy, was Game One just crazy game. The Mets won Game One, and if you were watching the first 6 innings or so, you probably were not expecting the Mets to take Game One. The Braves took a 3-0 lead early, and it looked like they had it in the bag. Spencer Schwellenbach was just pitching out of his mind. He gave up one earned run over 7 innings plus, and he was just having a great day on the mound, and then turned it over to the bullpen, and the bullpen did not have a great day on the mound because the Mets scored 6 in the 8th inning to take a 6-3 lead in the top of the 8th. That game taking place in Atlanta in Truist Park. Very nice park, I will say. I've been there quite a few times, as it is the closest Major League Baseball park to me. In the bottom of the 8th, the Braves scored 4 to take a 7-6 lead and retake the lead. Wow, it was just insane, man. It was just absolutely crazy. The crowd that was there was just absolutely wild. And then in the top of the ninth, Francisco Lindor did what Francisco Lindor does. If you remember the 2016 playoffs for the Cleveland Guardians, the Cleveland Indians at that time, you might remember one of the greatest home run calls of all time from Matt Vasgersian as Francisco Lindor hit a home run, and Vasgersian just went absolutely insane with Lindor with a drive as the crowd was yelling over him. It was just an insane call, and Francisco Lindor did it once again yesterday to give the Mets an 8-7 lead, and the Mets would hold on to that lead and win Game One, clinching their spot in the playoffs, and then heading to Game Two, where they had a chance to keep the Braves out of the playoffs, or the Braves win and they make it in the playoffs, and the Diamondbacks stay home. Game Two starts. Chris Sale was supposed to start Game Two, but he was scratched with back soreness. It's apparently something that he had been dealing with for weeks. Alex Anthopoulos, the Braves general manager, came out in the press conference between the games and said that Chris Sale would not be starting. It would wind up being Grant Holmes, who also pitched on Sunday. He went an inning and 2/3 on Sunday for the Braves. And Grant Holmes just had an insane 4 innings, no runs. I think he was 1 hit and 7 strikeouts after pitching an inning and 2/3 on Sunday. So Grant Holmes stepped up in a big way for the Braves when they needed it the most. In my opinion, I think the Braves and Mets may have struck a deal. I know it's kind of a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory type thing, but it would not surprise me at all if the Braves and Mets struck a deal that since the Mets won Game One, the Mets would lay down and let the Braves win Game Two so they wouldn't exhaust all of their resources heading into the wild card rounds today, having to get on a plane, having both teams having to get on planes as early as last night to fly to their respective cities where they will be playing today. But the Braves won that game 3-0. There was nothing exciting that happened in that game other than Grant Holmes going 4 innings and giving up 1 hit and 7 strikeouts. The Mets struck out a lot. They put in a lineup that was not really worthy of a Major League Baseball game. It's a lot of quadruple A guys and Pete Alonso, who's going to be a free agent. Matt Olson played in all 162, and I think Marcell Ozuna played in all 162 for the season. Matt Olson really turned it on for the Braves at the end. He was one of their best hitters in the season, despite the rough start that he had. But that's enough about the Braves. If you're wondering why I know so much about the Braves, it's because I live in Braves country. So most of my friends that are baseball fans are Braves fans and or cover the Braves in Lindsey Crosby's case. But we are going to move on to the Phillies now and what that means for the Phillies. And what that does mean for the Phillies is that after yesterday's game, the Phillies will now face either the Brewers or the Mets on Saturday. First game of the National League Divisional Series. 5-game series will start on Saturday. It will be against the New York Mets or the Milwaukee Brewers. That series is going to be on Fox, so it'll be on FS1 or Big Fox or both. Right now, the times are TBD. The pitchers, of course, are TBD. I mean, we have a pretty good guess of who's going to go 1, 2, and 3 for the Phillies, and we know who's going to go game 4 for the Phillies. It's going to be Ranger Suarez, as the team came out and said the other day that Ranger Suarez will be the game 4 starter for the Phillies, at least in the National League Division Series. In my opinion, it'll probably be Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, Christopher Sanchez, Ranger Suarez. Probably how they'll go with it. Honestly, they should probably put Christopher Sanchez in the 2-hole just because of how much better he pitches at Citizens Bank Park than he does away from Citizens Bank Park. It is a night and day difference in ERA for him at CBP as away from CBP. And that it's just, he should probably go game 2. And like I said yesterday, I don't think the Phillies will have an issue facing either team of the Brewers or Mets. But if it were up to me, I would rather the Phillies face the Brewers than the Mets because it'll be a lot less stressful for the Phillies. They won't have to exhaust as many resources, play deep into games because the Brewers just do not have as good of a roster, as good of a lineup, as good of a pitching staff outside of Devin Williams as the Mets do. And the Mets would push the Phillies to the limits. They are a divisional rival. They don't want to see another divisional rival do well, except maybe yesterday, 10 full hat time. But the Brewers would be the better matchup for the Phillies in the National League Division Series than the Mets would. But it's going to be fun. The playoffs do start today. So we have October baseball starting on October the 1st. This is the one of the best times of the year if you are a baseball fan. For me, it's trade deadline, free agency, playoffs, especially as someone who covers the Philadelphia Phillies. You cannot beat Red October. No one can beat Red October. I don't care what anyone tells you, what anyone says. The Philadelphia Phillies fans are the best in baseball, and they show it day in and day out in October. There is no place in baseball with the same atmosphere as Citizens Bank Park in the playoffs. And I will take that to my grave. That is a hill I will die on. And it's just insane what the Phillies fans do day in and day out. Even in the regular season, in big games in the regular season, are selling out most of the games, finishing 3rd in attendance, which is just phenomenal. Great job, Phillies fans. Good job showing up day in and day out and cheering on your team. If more teams did that, less teams would move from the cities that they are being in. The Phillies were linked to Garrett Crochet in trade talks, talking about people not supporting the teams that they are in the city with, and that's the Chicago White Sox. Garrett Crochet. Phillies were linked to him in trade talks ahead of the 2024 MLB trade deadline, and they have been yet again linked to him in trade talks here recently. Nothing can happen until the Phillies are out of the postseason, which may be a lot longer than most people that are not Phillies fans will hope. But the White Sox wanted Andrew Painter at the trade deadline for Garrett Crochet, and I actually wrote about this a week or two ago. I think it was one day last week for Sports Illustrated. The Phillies said no, and I do not blame them for saying no because Garrett Crochet is not a pitcher that would require an Andrew Painter in return, no matter how much team control he has left. It also came out a few days ahead of the deadline that Garrett Crochet said he would only pitch in the postseason for a contender if he was given a contract extension. I don't know what his thought process behind that was, but this is not football and this is not basketball. That is not something that a baseball player does. You do not come out and say that, especially one with a 3.58 ERA over the season. And it might have been better at the time. I'm not sure, but he is not a good enough baseball player to be saying things like that. Never would you ever hear any baseball player that is good enough to say things like that say things like that. Shohei Ohtani never said that. Mike Trout never said that. Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, Juan Soto, none of these guys have ever said that. And a lot of them have Scott Boras as an agent. And I'm pretty sure that Garrett Crochet does not have Scott Boras as an agent. That was something that really irked me at the time, and it still irks me today. And like I said, I wrote about this for Sports Illustrated last week. So if you want to go on Sports Illustrated and check that piece out, it's there for your perusal. But it's as a baseball player, you that's not a mindset you have. I mean, if you want to have a mindset like that, you can go play football or go play basketball. That's not something we do here in Major League Baseball. And that should not, I hope that is not a trend that begins across the league, because that's a bad look. It's very Bush League, in my opinion. And I mean, I'm all for players getting paid. I have no problem with players getting paid, but having that mindset is not a good look. And it's probably skewed my view on him. And while he would be an improvement over Taijuan Walker, hell, I could probably go out there and pitch and be an improvement over Taijuan Walker. As someone who covers the Phillies just strictly because of those comments that came out, I do not want him to be a member of the Philadelphia Phillies. But he did finish the season with a 3.58 ERA. It was his first season as a full-time starter. He made 32 starts, only 146 innings. They didn't want to run him out there too much because it was his first season as a full-time starter. This was his career high in innings pitched. He did have 209 strikeouts in those 146 innings, which is a really good strikeout total. Only a 1.15 ERA plus, so he was only 15% better than league average. I'm gonna repeat that for those in the back. He was only 15% better than league average. And I'm gonna let that breathe for a second. 2.69 fielding independent pitching and a 1.068 whip. So he's not awful. He's definitely not bad. And like I said, he would definitely be an improvement over Taijuan Walker, but not for the price that the Chicago White Sox have asked. If they want Andrew Painter, if they're still wanting Andrew Painter involved in the trade, then that's 100% got to be a no-go for the Phillies, because that is just too much of a price. I mean, really, if you look at the Phillies prospects, you'd have to say no to Andrew Painter. You'd have to say no to Justin Crawford. You'd have to say no to Aiden Miller. And I mean, even with Mick Abel struggling, you'd probably have to say no to him. I mean, if all they wanted was Mick Abel after his season last year, then sure, go ahead. But if he is a part of a multi-prospect package, then no, you got to say no to that. He would be a good 5 for the Phillies, and there's no doubt about that. And that has been the only glaring hole that the Phillies have had this season. But he may not be worth the price that the White Sox want for him. And that's what you have to decide. Is that production in the 5 hole of your rotation enough to pay what the White Sox want? And if Andrew Painter is a part of that trade, then no, the production is not enough. Even if it's Andrew Painter and Garrett Crochet 1-for-1, the production is not enough because of what Andrew Painter is projected to become. And a year or two ago, you never would have heard me say that. I'm not a prospect guy by any means. In my opinion, I've heard it said many times before, and this is something I live by. If I were to become a GM at any point in the future, parades are cooler than prospects. And that has been a saying that has resonated with me over the years, and I have repeated it many, many times. But in this case, with what Andrew Painter is projected to become, you got to stick with Andrew Painter. I mean, going into 2025, he will probably be the number 5 pitcher in the rotation, assuming he doesn't get hurt in spring training. If he is ready for spring training, the Phillies will surely try to work him into that number 5 role. And no matter what he would do, he'd have a limited workload because he's coming off of Tommy John surgery, missed all of this year and all of last year. But he'd still be better than Taijuan Walker. I mean, that was just throwing him every 5 days. I wrote about this multiple times on multiple different platforms. Taijuan Walker is not a viable option for any major league roster. You can go back and look. I might have put it out on Twitter at some point, but at the time the announcement was made that the Phillies signed Taijuan Walker, I was very anti that signing because Taijuan Walker has not been good in his career outside of 2 seasons, and both of those happen to be contract seasons. In every other season, he has been mediocre to bad, and then his time with the Phillies, he's just been absolutely atrocious. And then, of course, you have the tweet after the postseason last year with the hashtag disrespect at an all-time high. Well, what you did on the field this year was disrespectful at an all-time high, brother. So, don't be expecting to be on the playoff roster this year because that is just not good. But that's not what I was here to talk about today. I was here to talk about Garrett Crochet, and sometimes I go on tangents, so be ready for that. But yeah, Garrett Crochet linked in trade talks with the Chicago White Sox and the Philadelphia Phillies, so we'll have to keep an eye on that as we move forward into the offseason after the postseason. In my opinion, he's probably a better fit for the Dodgers. They can deal with that. As a Philly, the price is just much, much too high, and the resources that would be spent on him and the contract extension that he would demand, or else he would not be pitching in the postseason, could be better spent on a guy like Juan Soto, who is a free agent this offseason and who the Phillies could use much more than a pitcher because the Phillies have the best top 4 pitchers in starting rotation in baseball. And that is that. Appreciate y'all joining us today. It was a shorter episode today than yesterday. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you like, comment, rate, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Give us a 5-star rating on Spotify so this podcast can be shown to more Phillies fans just like you. Check out the daily baseball podcast, First Pitch, with Lindsey Crosby, Christian Rao, and myself as the third man as we talk about baseball on a national scale. And until next time, I've been Troy. You've been awesome. Peace, love, and rock and roll. I'm out. Bye.